Today we're going to make some Fauxtex, a quick and easy substitute for latex. It takes just a few ingredients you can find in your kitchen, like cornstarch, plain gelatin, and water. We're going to start with the cornstarch, gelatin, and a half a cup of water. We also need toothpicks, water-based makeup, measuring spoons, a whisk, a spatula, a Ziploc bag or another piece of plastic to build on, a container with a lid, and a saucepan. We are going to start with 2 tablespoons of cornstarch. You can also use tapioca starch, which will give you a smoother consistency, but can be a little harder to find in some grocery stores. Next, you're going to want to add a half a cup of cool water to a pan. And I like to start with the cool water, add a little bit of my plain gelatin, and you're going to add a little bit to the water. And you don't want to add too much too soon, just enough to coat that water. Turn your stove on, grab your whisk, and start mixing. If you start with warm water, it's going to clump on you. So if you start with that nice cool water, you can add a little bit at a time and just keep whisking. And you can see a little bit gathered on my whisk already. And as soon as that water starts to heat up a little bit on you, and it's a pretty low temperature, you can add a little bit of your liquid foundation. I actually find the cheaper the water-based foundation, the better. This is the only one I have, so I'll use about 3 to 4 squirts of that. And you'll see when I stop for a second, it's still separating. And the reason is the water's not warm enough. As soon as it starts to warm up, it'll change. Next, I'm going to add the cornstarch. You noticed I added my cornstarch to my bowl at the beginning because it's pretty messy to scoop out of the bag. And you can see here it's damp today, so it's actually sticking in the bowl. So I'm going to grab a sifter and use that to slowly sift my cornstarch over, because you don't want to add too much cornstarch to your water too quickly, just a little bit at a time. If you don't have a sifter, just grab a spoon and add a little bit to your water and keep whisking as you go so the cornstarch doesn't clump in your water in your mixture. But if it does, as you heat up, you'll be able to get it. Just keep sifting and whisking, sifting and whisking. And I basically tap it or add it to it just enough to coat the top of the surface of the water, and then keep going. And this is the part where I tend to get a little impatient. Try to be patient, nice low temperature, whisk it in. And I'm going to try to move it around so you can see it a little better. And you want to make sure you scrape the sides and the bottom of your pan pretty consistently on that low heat. Make sure none of the gelatin is gathering at the bottom. And if you find that it's not firming up for you, make sure you get all that cornstarch and all the gelatin in there. You're going to see a couple globs starting. As soon as you see those globs and you see it on the bottom of the pan, make sure you go ahead and whisk. Show you a little bit with the end of my whisk so you can see what it starts to look like. And you don't have to add your makeup. I like to add makeup if I'm making it for myself or somebody I know. I add their foundation color because then it's going to be closer to the skin color. But you can skip the makeup part and put the makeup on over the prosthetic once you're done. So you can see it start to congeal. I'm trying to hold it up with the whisk so you can see what that starts to look like. It looks a little slimy. It looks a little bit, like colorless Jell-O. And if you're in a pinch, you can use Jell-O, but make sure you're using the sugar-free Jell-O. The sugar is going to change that consistency on you. I'm going to scoop some up with a spoon so you can see it really quick. I'm going to pour it into my container. Warning, if you're using a plastic container, definitely let it cool a little bit. I'm using a heat-safe, microwave-safe glass container so I can pour some in there. And then grab that spatula and scoop it out of your pan. Make sure you're getting it off the sides and the bottom. This is all non-toxic, but as soon as I'm done scraping that off, I'm going to put some warm water in my pan and let it sit in the sink so it doesn't congeal and be harder to clean up afterwards. Now, if you were wondering why I had that Ziploc bag, I think the Ziploc bag makes an excellent plastic surface to work on top of. I'm going to make a similar gash to what we did for the latex project, and I'm just using my finger. I've let the gelatin cool down. It's probably been like 3 or 4 minutes in real time since I took this Fauxtex off the stove, so it's cooler. I'm using the side of my butter knife. You can use one of those plastic palette knives you had in your kit to get those sides nice and smooth. I'm grabbing this other bowl of Fauxtex. It's the exact same recipe that I just showed you, but it's a day old. I wanted to make sure you could see what it looks like after it sits in the fridge overnight, because the really cool thing about this is you can always reheat it. If you put your Fauxtex and seal it in a microwavable bowl, all you have to do is take it over to the microwave and give it about 8 to 10 seconds. You don't want to do any longer than 10 seconds at a time, because what will happen is you'll burn that gelatin and you can't use it once you've burnt the gelatin. It also really stinks when you burn it because it's gelatin. You can see here I've warmed it up, and even if it doesn't look like it's warmed up, you want to test that with your finger in the side or a knife in case it has a hot spot, and you can apply it directly to yourself just like you applied it to the piece of plastic to make one off of you. So I'm doing an appliance directly onto myself, and you can see how fast it goes on. It builds up really well and really thick. So unlike the latex where you had to make a bunch of layers at a time, you can actually leave a nice goopy glob there and it builds much faster. And once it starts to dry, you can carve into it. So I'm taking the back of a toothpick, because it's a little duller on the back side, to carve out the middle of the gash. And you can also make other little details on the side too. And now I'm going to make a second prosthetic, like a boil or a wound, something more circular. So I'm going to make another one on my plastic so you can see. This one's more circular, and I'm going to show you what it looks like if you want to build up that appliance or prosthetic with a piece of tissue or toilet paper. And I just rolled it between my hands really quick so it looks like a hole, like a pop boil maybe. And I'm going to coat it with some additional Fauxtex over top, so I'm hiding all that paper. Couple moments have gone by. I want to see what this looks like on my hand, and you can see those edges get a little puckery. You can just smooth those out with a little warm water, and then I'm going to take a toothpick and carve down the middle. It's going to give me a better, deeper gash appearance on my hand and be able to work up those middle parts. You also get some good globby bits, so keep those because you can add those back into any of the other prosthetics to give a nice organic shape. If you want to clean up, like I said, just use a little warm water and relax your hand and clean up those edges. My hand was probably flexed when I originally did this, which causes those puckers. Once you're done working with your Fauxtex, seal it up and put it in the fridge, because you want to make sure that gelatin is refrigerated. And I'll give you a couple close-ups. You can see how nice and dry my real hands are, but the prosthetics look great. There's a nice, even, smooth transition between the two. The color is really close. To go back in and make these look even more gory, we can add a little bit of special effects makeup. I really like the Ben Nye Bruise and Abrasion Wheel. It's the colors that are on the palette if you got a palette from me. I'm using mostly the dried blood with a little bit of the blood red, blending them together, and I'm working along the edges of the prosthetic, right where the flange goes to my skin before it raises up, because I'm getting in those crevices. Contrast equals interest, and if you get the color right in where a shadow would naturally fall and work it in there back and forth, it's gonna pop really fast. I'm going through the middle of the gash and using a little bit of that misty violet with the dried blood, so it looks even deeper than the gash actually is. And if you don't like the way it's blending, you can add a little bit of foundation color and blend that out. You always want to blend from the flange straight out from your hand. It's going to look more natural. It's going to look irritated and rise up. Of course, we always can add a little blood if it's a fresh wound right to the middle of it. I'm using the Krylon because it's right here. I prefer using my own homemade blood, which you've all learned how to do. If you're doing this on your face, make sure you're using the edible blood. If you're doing something by clothes, maybe the washable blood's the way to go. Less blood is more. Always going to run on you. So keep a towel close by so you can soak up that excess. On the little circular one, I added a little bit of blood to see what it looked like if it could get away without doing any makeup. I think I'm just going to go in real quick and add a little red around the edge. The downside to Fauxtex, you don't want to use it where there's going to be water or a lot of heat, because the gelatin is going to re-emulsify, and you can't reuse the prosthetic once you make it like you can with a latex one. It's a good way to practice before you do a latex prosthetic, or if someone's allergic. If you're building directly onto somebody's skin, it feels slightly more natural than the latex. It looks pretty great. It was actually really quick, and it's fun and cheap, non-toxic, and no latex involved. Go ahead and try it.